Welcome to the Greenfield Report with Henry R. Greenfield, your gateway to understanding today's geopolitical landscape. With 50 years of experience across 10 countries, Henry shares expert insights on world affairs, offering practical solutions and engaging guest perspectives. Dive into the Greenfield Report for lively discussions on the issues that matter.
This is Henry R. Greenfield reporting from Europe once again, back from the United States. It is August 19th, 2025. Why are we mentioning this date? The reason is very simple. There are so many moving parts between the Ukrainian, Russian, and American and European leaders that it is very hard to keep up with the changes that are going on, not just by the day, but sometimes by the hour. In the following Greenfield Report, you are going to hear our solution to solve the crisis, and the invasion will end, and also the war will end, and there will be permanent security guarantees that will have boots on the ground by the EU. And why do we say the EU when later on we were going to talk about that the United States may also put boots on the ground? The reason is Trump took that off the table again today on Fox News. He said he's the president and it will not happen. So these kinds of things where Trump is gradually backing off, then pushed back in by Zelensky and the EU, and then later Putin pushes him another direction. This is going to happen on and on as far as we go. Also, it is very clear that Putin is going to avoid speaking directly with Zelensky and being in the room with Zelensky at all costs. In other words, the trilateral side, Putin wants to play that out. Meanwhile, today on the battlefield, Ukraine blew up a couple more ammunition depots for Russia. So what this really means is, are we going to have a settlement? Are we going to have, certainly not a ceasefire, but are we going to have an overall end to this war? It seems to me likely not. And that's why when you listen to the following Greenfield Report, I would like to have this addendum in front of it and not at the end. And what do I mean by that? What it means is Europe is digging in. You can see more and more Europe's unification is unified behind Zelensky. They did a great job yesterday in Washington, D.C. Today, already Trump is waffling, as he always does. What that really means is Zelensky and the EU need to step up and need to keep Trump as close on side as possible. Can there be a summit between the three of them, meaning Zelensky, Putin, and Trump? Absolutely. If Zelensky plays his cards right and says that he's willing to talk about territory, then it's definitely possible. That will lure Putin into a trap, and that is the key. And you'll hear more about this on the following Greenfield Report. So again, this is Henry R. Greenfield back in Europe, and now on with the current Greenfield Report, talking about this in greater detail. Today we are going to discuss Ukraine at a crossroads, as several meetings have happened, including the summit in Alaska between Putin and Trump, followed by the meetings in Washington, D.C., where Volodymyr Zelensky showed up with several European leaders, ranging from the head of the EU to France, UK, Finland, and NATO, as well as Trump's new best friend, Meloni from Italy. So what has actually been happening and what has been accomplished and where can we go from here? As I have been traveling throughout the United States for 7 weeks and only recently came back to Europe, it seems very increasingly clear to me that Americans are of two minds about what's going on outside the United States. First of all, the United States is going through a very relative period of calm. Despite the fact that Trump is sending in National Guard troops to Washington, D.C., and it seems to be his never-ending battle against black women mayors, and that means in several places, including Los Angeles and now Washington, D.C., the rest of the country is moving along and wondering, why is Trump doing all of this office, when in fact the economy that was taken over from Biden has seemed to survive many of the Trump tariffs and other shocks that he has made to the economy. At the same time, on the international front, Trump's supporters, the MAGA crowd, feel very strongly that Trump is now the man of peace, brokering a couple of peace deals, one in Africa, another between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and of course there was the Pakistan-India standoff. None of these, of course, are very important compared to the real action, which is Ukraine-Russia or Gaza and Israel and Hamas. You could also throw in there Iran, where Trump has actually made no progress after dropping his 2,000-pound bunker buster bombs on the nuclear facilities for Iran. This is what we mean when we talk about Trump when he goes to the international side. Domestically, Trump can do whatever he wants. Remember, he was given just about entire immunity by the Supreme Court in its ruling last year, where anything that he is doing in his official capacity, or in his way of putting it, for the betterment of America, again, in his judgment, then it's okay. So taking on the states or trashing California or whatever he does to anybody in the United States, he can pretty much at the moment get away with it. And he has the support unwaveringly, of course, from Fox, Newsmax, and other outlets, as well as many of the mainline media, which have been cowed by Trump. However, on the international front, it is a different story. Outside of the few Trump MAGA supporters who keep saying he is the man of peace, he's actually accomplished very little. We have documented this before in the Greenfield Report, and now we'd like to delve into the Ukraine-Russia situation. So again, let's set the stage. What happened last week in Alaska? Well, Trump got together with Putin, starting off with a ceasefire, but then backing off of that afterwards and saying, no, we don't need to have a ceasefire, which was his total agreement with Ukraine and the European leaders before he went into the meeting. However, emerging with, no, let's go for a comprehensive peace. Needless to say, this was not welcomed by the Europeans, nor Volodymyr Zelensky, who knows that this delay would mean an ongoing mass murder in effect for his people in Ukraine, as Putin, even while he was meeting with Trump, was dropping bombs with his drones on places like Kyiv, killing innocent civilians, which he has done with impunity since February 2022. If we go back all the way, of course, to Crimea in 2014, this seems to have been the number one project of expanding the old Russian Empire by Putin to effectively take over Ukraine. He has, of course, failed at this. 3.5 years into this war, he has slowly taken over the Donbass and other regions in the eastern part of Ukraine. However, he has failed in the rest of Ukraine, and Ukraine, in fact, has taken back all of the territory that it lost early in the war in the other parts of the country, particularly in the north near Kyiv. So what was accomplished out of last week's initial Alaska-Putin summit, or so-called summit, where the red carpet was rolled out? Well, what was accomplished was Trump, once again, was the taco president. Nobody can paper this over, but everyone was saying, wow, that was great, a great performance by Trump, because he didn't cave. He didn't actually give in 100% to Putin, but he actually didn't stand up to him either. Instead, what he did was adopted the Putin stance, which again is this so-called long-term idea of negotiating a peace deal. As we know, Trump is a deal guy. He talks about deals all the time. He is not going to listen to the 25-year history of Putin thumbing his nose at everybody from G.W. Bush, who looked into his soul and saw, I'm not sure what he saw, but whatever he saw, he was wrong, or Obama, who drew that line and then at the very most got Putin kicked out of what was then the G8 to become the G7, which, of course, while Obama supporters saying he's one of the greatest presidents in the history of the United States, like to ignore the fact that it didn't hurt Putin one single bit. Don't forget, after that, Angela Merkel still went forward with Nord Stream 1, and then Nord Stream 2 was supposed to come online, which meant that Germany in particular, but most of the rest of Europe, would get their natural gas from Russia. Well, of course, that got cut off once the invasion by Russia of Ukraine happened in February 2022. Joe Biden, on the other hand, he met the moment. He helped get the LNG out of Texas and over to Rotterdam, where facilities were created to taking natural gas, putting it into LNG, taking it over to the LNG terminals, and then distributing it throughout Europe, thus negating the entire Russian approach of starving the rest of Europe with no natural gas. In short, Europe has had very little price rise on the natural gas side, which they are, again, primarily dependent upon for fuel and heating in the winter. Also, as we all should note, Germany and other places in Europe have been pushing for alternative energies, which means not as much on the nuclear side. And Germany, in fact, reopened a couple of coal plants. So all in all, Europe has been not in a very good position when it comes to combating Russia. That being said, after Trump emerged from the let's do a comprehensive peace deal, the Europeans went into action. And that is what I would like to speak about today, right now. The Europeans said they were going to go en masse to Washington, D.C., and that included, as I already noted, Macron especially in the lead, in order to push their idea of a ceasefire first, and then to go for a more comprehensive settlement later. Trump was then met, of course, with the reality that Putin is not going to give up the territory that he feels he's already won, and especially not going to discuss Crimea. So what actually happened? And I would like to make this key point. Volodymyr Zelensky came prepared this time. One thing you can say about him is that he knows how to adapt to a situation. Never forget that he was a comic actor who became president almost by accident just before the initial invasion happened by Russia in February 2022. Zelensky has always, from that time, met the moment, quite remarkably, in fact, in my view. So when he was humbled in February 2025, when he met with Trump in that infamous scrum and also attacked by Vance and Hegseth, but in particular Vance, Zelensky knew that he could not come back again looking like the bedraggled guy coming off the front lines in Ukraine. Instead, he came in with a smart Euro-style suit, and this was remarked upon by the same guy who attacked him last time, who said that he was disrespectful to Trump and the United States, and had not said thank you enough. Well, it has been noted, Zelensky said thank you at least 4 times in the first 10 seconds of the meeting with Trump. We're talking about the public side now, the scrum where everyone's sitting on the couches. He also wore that wonderful suit, which was then remarked upon not just by the reporter, who Zelensky had a back and forth with on that, but also by Trump, who said, yeah, he looks great. In short, Zelensky changed the circumstances. He changed exactly what I talked about yesterday on Quora, which is if you don't like the options, change the situation. So where are we now as we move back to Europe and possible trilateral meeting between Trump, Zelensky, and Putin? You will note that today I also wrote in Quora and actually an outline of what I believe Zelensky should do to make that meeting a success. First of all, he's going to have to approach that meeting and have all the details in his head, just like I'm doing right now, speaking to you. No script, no notes. That's what Zelensky's got to do. He's got to walk in there and understand that he needs to keep Trump on side with him, or at very best, neutral. That means he's going to have a conversation with Trump and the Europeans in advance so they walk in with at least a modicum of a united front. Putin is going to feel that whatever happens, he is the strongest guy in the room. He's going to feel he has the cards. He's going to feel that he can control Trump or try to play Trump off against Zelensky. Zelensky is going to have to approach that meeting constantly saying, we said this, we believe this, we believe that. In other words, he, Trump, and the Europeans are united. When Putin brings up things like, well, he was forced to have his special program, his special action, special mission, whatever he wants to call that, Zelensky needs to counter that with saying, hey, I'm not here to talk about what you're doing or what you want to label that. And I am especially not wanting to talk about that right now, because if you want to talk about that, how would you feel if the United States invaded your country, or Europeans, or Ukraine for that matter? So let's take that off the table. Zelensky will also need to talk about, in theory, he's ready to talk about territory. And then, as I note in my Quora post, Zelensky needs to go step by step by step, working through this process, including actually getting out the maps and showing where those European troops will be stationed on the front lines. He also needs to talk about security guarantees before he will again admit or give up any territory. Now, remember, what he says he's giving up, Putin feels he's already got. So there will be some going back and forth on that. However, there needs to be a very clear idea that there will be European troops, boots on the ground, and also at least a partial pledge by Trump to have Americans on the ground. He can give up, Zelensky can, the no NATO. That's not necessary. It's not actually important because nobody thinks that Trump would ever back Article 5 anyway. So what really matters here, again, troops on the ground, boots on the ground. And what I'm also saying here is Zelensky needs to make it clear from his European allies that he will be backed by nuclear weapons. Yes, I'm sorry to say that, but he needs to say he has first strike capability and that the Europeans will stand with him. By doing this, step by step, not backing down, being ready, having it all in his head, making sure that Trump is aligned with him, Zelensky can get what he needs. And what is that he needs? What he needs is to end this war. He needs to have a front line with troops on it so that Putin cannot attack in the future. There is no such thing as security guarantees that Putin will ever honor, or anybody that comes after Putin, because trust me, once Putin is gone, there will be another guy who wants to establish or re-expand that old Russian empire. He needs to make sure, Zelensky does, that he has strong backing and support by the Baltics, who are immediately threatened by Putin, who says they don't have the right to exist. By, of course, Finland, which is the most frontline country or frontline state on the NATO front against Russia. He needs, of course, the support of Poland. Poland is critical as the second largest army in Europe right now, and Poland devotes well over 4% of its GDP for defense. So Poland has stepped up to the plate. So with these levels of support, my recommendation is that he also has Macron, who wants to be the fourth person in the meeting, but there's no way that Trump's going to let that happen because that really negates Trump's let's call it arbiter or Trump's negotiating advantage. However, Macron can be sitting in the next room. I'm recommending then what happens is at a certain point, when it does not seem to be going exactly the way that Zelensky wants, he can take a break and confer with Macron and maybe also with Trump separately away from Putin. They need to gang up on Putin, that is for sure. They need to be persistent, but Zelensky's got to stand on his own. Macron needs to be there to speak on behalf of the European partners. He needs to be in the background saying he's ready. He's ready to put boots on the ground. He should have some numbers. If Trump can do numbers in terms of like moving National Guard around into Washington, D.C. from red states, well, Macron can talk about 1,000 troops from him, or 1,500 troops from the U.K., or 5,000 troops from Poland, all on that front line to where they get 30, 40,000 troops, similar to what the United States has done and its allies, but mostly the United States, in the demilitarized zone in Korea, which has made not a peace, but that ceasefire has held for almost 70 plus years. So this is what we want in the end of the day for Zelensky. Zelensky to be strong, Zelensky to be smart, Zelensky to match up man to man with Putin, and Zelensky to have Trump neutral or on side with prearranged objectives and also a united cause together. With that, they can get Putin to either walk away, meaning then Trump will then go into action with also prearranged secondary sanctions, prearranged moving in troops anyway already. They need to threaten that they will move those troops into Ukraine, including, and a lot of people have pointed out, Americans can do logistics as they have done in other places. Europeans can do logistics inside Ukraine. They don't have to be on the front lines right now, but it does mean that possible drone fire could hit U.S. troops or European troops, which would escalate potentially the war. So the threat is there for Putin to understand that this is no longer taco president, no longer a paper tiger, and that there is a united front on the other side. I'm going to conclude by saying the key here is for Zelensky to carry the ball. He has got to be the man. He has to be prepared. He did some great work in Washington, D.C. by sidelining people that do not like him and do not like Ukraine, like J.D. Vance and Captain Pete, Secretary of Defense Hegseth. He's sidelined them, and he can get people like Marco Rubio to whisper in Trump's ear that this is a good deal, and of course get Witkoff to also go along with it. This is Henry R. Greenfield reporting on the Ukraine-Russia situation, where we are today as on August 19th, 2025, moving to the next level, which we hope to be seeing that it's Trump, Zelensky, and Putin in one room negotiating the end of the Ukraine-Russia war, with Macron in the next room holding the keys of the support by Europe.
Thank you for joining us on the Greenfield Report with Henry R. Greenfield. We hope today's insights into the ever-shifting geopolitical landscape have sparked your curiosity and broadened your perspective. Stay connected with us for more in-depth discussions and expert solutions. Until next time, keep exploring the world beyond the headlines.